Hello, how's it going today? So, I thought I would talk about something that happened just recently, a day or two ago, on Enneagram on Reddit, on the Enneagram subreddit on there. Basically, somebody came out of nowhere and made a video, this lady, that I didn't know, and she told me that I was a type 9 and told me that proceeded to tell me how ridiculous it was that I typed myself the way I do as an 8 with a 4 and a 5 fix, that I was obviously triple attachment, and okay, so this just kind of went in circles, and she brought up Enneagrammer and referenced that website and showed me how few people they have on that website that are of this combination of sexual over social, and it went on and on like that, and it was pretty lacking in any other substance, and it was rude. She cursed at me, and she was clearly, she self-typed as a 6, and this was the fanatical, brainwashed 6 exemplar. So basically, I thought I would go ahead and talk a little bit more about some background, behind Enneagrammer, and basically what's really going on with this kind of thinking. I was a member for many years of Type Watch, which is a secret forum. It no longer is active because I left and I was the only person keeping it afloat. But essentially, it was about video typing, vibe typing, the same way. All the video exemplars you see on Enneagrammer, that style was basically inspired by Type Watch. Type Watch came first, and John, everybody knows John, he was on Type Watch first as well, but he wasn't a very active member. So he was on there, and I don't know exactly what happened with, why Enneagrammer got started, who started it, where it came from. I don't know those other guys. I just know John, and that he was on Type Watch, and that he was watching and listening and participating. He wasn't the most active member, so it would make sense that he would sort of, turn against the group without really saying anything, or that he would go off and start his own group. I eventually left and told them why, told them why I was leaving. I actually tried to come back, to try to make things work once I'd sorted out some mental health issues, because I've had those issues, and it made it difficult for me to participate. And so, my story is a complicated one. Some people, they don't buy my story. I got into the Enneagram and mistyped myself as a 5, which they say can't happen to an 8, but it can. I'm certain that it can, because I'm living proof. And one of the reasons is online communities that propagate misinformation. Enneagrammer being a good example. All you have to do is analyze what's going on there on a deeper level. First of all, does everybody type themselves? Which can be hard to pick up on in a smaller community. But, you have to be certain that everybody is self-typing. That has to be done consistently. If that's not done consistently, then that's a broken group. You can start to look for problems. You can start to look for power disparities. So, for example, on TypeWatch, it was a matter of a few people having more influence, having more authority, and they had all typed themselves. The people that are typing themselves are the ones with the power and the authority. And sometimes they are ethical and they don't type other people. They, they rightfully own their own power and authority over their own type, but they don't try to project it onto others typing. It's just fairly straightforward. And if you study the Enneagram going back, regardless of the fact that there was always some teacher involved in teaching and transmitting the material and potentially aiding, in the process of self-identification, at the end of the day, it was a matter of self-identification, because the Enneagram typing can't work if you're not relating it to yourself on a deeper level. It's not going to work. That's the whole point behind it. So, therefore, the person, making the suggestions or helping or whatever is not, should be taken only as that. They can't be taken as an authority, as a blind authority. A few things can happen. First of all, you're clearly treating them as a kind of a cult leader, a God-given, divinely appointed authority. If you trust them above all others to type you, to have insight into your type, which they should not have, especially if they don't know you very well. Ideally, the person typing you would be somebody who knows the Enneagram extremely well and somebody who's very close to you, which is unlikely, is rare. And, even to take it a step further, that may not be ideal because the person close to you may be too biased. They may want to help you. They may want to have power over you. At the end of the day, it's simply a matter of learning the material and finding yourself in there. It's very straightforward. It's not, there's nothing, nothing that crazy about it. The only difficult part is learning the material and finding where it came from and distilling it and breaking down what it is and simplifying it. And that's where different Enneagram communities are getting it completely different from one another. They have different views and they have different ideas, and people naturally fall into authoritarianism and trying to control other people and have authority over their types and, groupthink and ganging up on people and trying to vote. And often the communities like TypeWatch or Enneagram have a few people that are given authority and they're trusted, and the people following along just kind of go along with it. When I was on TypeWatch, I was having fun, learning about the types, how to videotype people, and I was in kind of a, humbled place thinking, okay, cool, I'm going to learn this new thing, and, that was okay for a while, but within a year or two, I started to think, maybe I'm not a 5, right? It happens. I had only really read one book closely, and I'd read a ton of books during that time in all different disciplines. So the Enneagram wasn't my main focus. I was focused on literature and poetry, and I just was not interested in the Enneagram. I didn't get into it that deeply. I was fairly scattered, and after a while I started to think maybe I'm mistyped, because I could see that online. First of all, I could see that 8 was treated with more authority, possibly just on TypeWatch because the administrator there happens to be an 8, but I could feel a resonance with the type, and I knew enough about myself to realize that 5, I had to adapt 5 really to fit me, as we all do with the types, right? Anytime you match yourself up against a type, always you're going to do some adapting for yourself. It doesn't have you in there. It has ideas that you conform yourself to. So that'll happen with any typing, even an accurate one. It's just a matter of how much of that there really is. So if it's a trifix point but not your core type, like it was with me, then there's a strong resonance. Even with the 8, there's a line, there's a strong resonance, but on the deepest level, if you really break it down to how the core type is defined, the triad, the sins and the passions of the types, all the, basic stuff, that really has to resonate on a very deep level. There can't be any reservations there. There can't be another type that kind of makes more sense, right? If you go back to the core material, the thread, I talk about the thread that runs through all of the descriptions. It's the instinctual triad, which came from Gurdjieff, and then Ichazo preserved it, and Naranjo preserved it, and all of their students preserved it. They didn't get rid of it, they kept it, okay? Same with the passion, the main characteristic. Basically, the stuff that the early guys were working with, that was retained. They all agreed that that was the type, the fixation, the chief feature. The Enneagram, even the trifix stuck around. Catherine Favre held on to it. Okay, so that's kind of the distillation of the Enneagram. That's what you need to focus on to determine what your type really is. The rest is noise, all of the extra stuff in the descriptions. There'll always be a point where you look at this and say, well, okay, on a deeper level, I can see that this is probably my type, or it's probably not my type, and then you eventually get there. So around 1 or 2 years in of just kind of participating in online communities, in Type Watch, that was it. It was just the one, right? Often people are just in the one, and they get into an echo chamber. So within a year or two, I started to question it, and immediately, of course, people stepped in and said, no, that's not. They were rude, right? They do what people do when they want to control you, or when they think you're wrong, for no real reason, no particularly good reason, except for, what the administrator says, or what a few people say who are incredibly biased, without knowing me. I think they'd seen a very short video of me. And, the only types that were ever proposed for me were 5, which was how I self-typed as the 5 with 6 wing, because I thought 6 can do all kinds of things. It can be counterphobic and it can be aggressive. And so 5, 6, and 3, those were the only types that they suggested, and 3 was never really suggested as a core type. 8 was never accepted as possible. Only 1 or 9 were proposed as gut points, but never as core types. So that was how Type Watch, that's how the culture on there was run. It was just a few people, an administrator, a few other people, and kind of a revolving cast of people who came and went over the years, who some of them probably thought, well, this is bullshit. Some of them just found other things to do, and it was just this random group of people, and I was one of the core members. And for a little while, I listened to him and I trusted him, but after I had had enough bad things happen in my life, finally I put together, like, surely I'm a type 8. Eventually I did. And I didn't talk about it because I knew what they would say. I knew that they would be mean about it, and we'd become friends over the years. So I didn't talk about it. I just kept living my life thinking that I am 8 wing 7, partly because I resonated with the administrator on there and felt like, well, he's intellectual, he's 5-ish, he's all of these things similar to me, why can't I be an 8? And I didn't speak up about it because I didn't want to be gaslighted. I knew what I was in for. And, eventually I left, but for years, I struggled because you don't realize just how brainwashed you are. If you're in a community that has a certain way of doing things, it becomes brainwashing and you just don't see it. You're not really taught to think for yourself. You're taught to follow what somebody else does and what somebody else thinks. So, I don't know what Enneagrammer is like, but I know that Enneagrammer, came from TypeWatch, and there was another list online called Stack 'em Up, which David Gray was a member of, and that was also a copycat of TypeWatch. And the administrator on TypeWatch, he is a narcissist. Textbook. He's very smart. Often, these leader types are clever. They're smart. He knows what he's doing, but he's a narcissist. And all of those techniques are straight out of the narcissistic abuse handbook, to undermine people, to get them over onto your side and, get you caught up in this loop of trying to get their approval and trying to push the right buttons. And, for me, it became a game of whether I could find a video type exemplar of a celebrity and then, propose typing that I thought that he would agree with. And over time, I got better and better at it. And, all that really shows is that people have a way of communicating and coming up with a kind of a language, an agreed upon language over these conventions, right? All you have to have is a kind of an agreement, a kind of understanding between the people. That's all that it takes, really, to type video exemplars in a way that you feel is consistent, because there's no confirmation, right? I mean, the whole point of the Enneagram was to confirm every single one of those self-typings. To do it from an armchair, for me to set up thousands of exemplars on my own, without confirming anything, that's just a game, right? It's not connected to reality in any way. And, what building a list like that does is it creates a false sense of authority to people looking at it. It creates a false sense of confidence in the people that created the list, so that people can now go on Enneagrammer and see their list and say, oh, wow, these guys really know what they're doing, right? I mean, they have all these people typed, and you look over some of them and maybe they're taken from the media or from the mainstream and they make sense, like Donald Trump is on there as an aide, and, so they get you to follow along with it and say, oh yeah, this is good, this is cool, it has some people that I recognize, and that I can understand their types, but it has a lot of other people too, and these people clearly know what they're doing, and they really have it figured out. That's kind of the thought process. And then that gives them the authority then to type you. Okay. And once you see their patterns, there's really no thought put into it. Everybody's typed the same way, very similarly. There's hardly any, anything put into it. It's just kind of blah, this triple attachment thing, basically what that lady said to me, and I thought it could have been a joke at first, because it felt like a joke. It was really clumsy. It was grasping at straws, and it was rude. And it was all just kind of based on this tunnel vision, echo chamber, culture that's predictable, where certain types are gatekept, the 4, 5, and 8, you don't see many of them. Everybody else is triple attachment. You don't see any sexual first. And it just kind of goes round and around like that. And, the justifications for it they don't even matter. It's very subjective. The point is that they're happening. There's something, right? There's some process they have. We don't have to know what it is, right? It could be, me on TypeWatch, it was basically just, oh yeah, look at this guy. This has kind of a 7-ish vibe. What do you think? Da, da, da. And then the person would respond, pro or con. And then maybe another person would respond and add something on with the stacking. And there's just kind of a back and forth. And then it gets put up on the list by the administrator. Okay, so every community has its process for creating those standards, which are almost like laws. These are something put in place that allow them to control everything, because now we have a standard that other people are agreeing on, and that can then be used against the members if they decide, hey, I want to say something about my own type. Of course, always look for the people that don't have to do that. They can be self-appointed. It could be a matter of you standing up and saying, hey guys, I type myself this way, deal with it. And eventually that was my attitude on Type Watch, but by then, nobody was around anymore to talk about it. I think the game was kind of up, and I was a little bit aggressive about how I did it, and it was over a long period of time too, so things slowed down on there. But that was the attitude I eventually developed going into other communities, because that's what you need to have. You're going to be confronted with people like this lady who, are trying to coerce you, using basically their, fake cult leaders' ideas and throwing them in your face. And it's just important to understand how that operates, and how people that follow those methods haven't really studied the Enneagram, and that it's largely based on stereotypes. It's based on picking up somebody's mannerisms and their look and their energy, and trying to type them just to fit them quickly, broadly into a type. You can see how they might type me as triple attachment because I'm chill, and I have a mellow, nice way about me, and sometimes a monotone voice and all of this stuff, and I'm just the way I am. You can see that they would want to type me maybe as a 9, or, Enneagrammer, they thought I was a 6, but I was also a little bit more agitated that day. So, I guess I was in disintegration. And I've considered 9. I've considered every single type, as you would. You would have to, typing yourself. And there could be people telling me, you seem like a 9, this and that. But I've talked to people close to me as well about the types. When my wife was still around, one of these days I'll figure out a way to convince her to come back. She's incredibly sick, by the way, psychologically, which makes it hard, but she didn't see 9 because I'm not 9ish in the conventional way. I think the people that want to retype me as a 9 have to rewrite the script for what 9 is, and that's problematic, because then you have to learn just their way, and there's no way it can run as deeply as the Enneagram that other people have constructed over time. They should remain consistent with the Enneagram over time. It shouldn't be some new Enneagram that they came up with that, fits a different definition, and some of the best descriptions, the best definitions go back to Ichazo, because, again, everything was based on what he laid down. He was extremely influential. You're likely to get, the most broad, which can encompass the most cases, the most manifestations, by going back to him. And often it's simply a matter of sitting down and reading those core authors, reading Ichazo, Gurdjieff, Naranjo did a huge amount of work, all of these core people, and prioritizing their work, looking at it in hyper-focus, and just distilling the types. Neighboring types, 8 is right next to 9. It's not, they're more similar, I think, than people realize. They border on a wing and all this stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to share that experience that I had in these groups, and my insights into it and how it operates. To some people, they always learn to type themselves and would never consider, querying other people. And, I think it's something with the instincts. Sometimes if people have more social or more sexual, they're kind of looking for that missing piece from other people. They kind of want somebody to say, hey, this seems right to me, or this seems wrong. And people rarely would say, this seems exactly right. It's a cultural thing for people to want to offer something, right? To if they're given the power, hey, what do you think of this? It's normal for the person to want to change something. It's tempting, right? If somebody sends me, an example of themselves and they're typing, it's tempting to want to say, oh, I would probably change the wing to this, or have you considered this? And then it's tempting for the person that asked to really take that with a lot of weight, and say, oh, well, maybe I am actually, the other wing, or maybe my second instinct is different what I thought. So it's part of a cultural exchange. It's a cultural community thing that people do, and we kind of get in these patterns without thinking about it. So it's very easy to get lost in this and to be in a group for months or years and just kind of be, going along with things. And, maybe you're there for other reasons. It was kind of nice to be on there because I was very, very active, and we didn't always talk about my type, or, I didn't have to do anything in particular to be on there. And I enjoyed typing exemplars and talking to people and having friends online. It's just kind of something I enjoyed. So it's easy to do that, and then to not really look anywhere else into the Enneagram, to not go outside, of those walls. Very common for people to become sheltered within a community online, regardless of type. It doesn't matter the type. There were 8s on there. There were people that were, agreed to be typed as 8s. A couple of them, they weren't as active on there. And one of them struggled to figure out all his full typing. He was still struggling with it until the end, and suspected he was really asexual after all. But it would make sense that he would never get there, because sexual is gate kept like a motherfucker, especially a sexual 8, as you can see why I was attacked. And, I'm skeptical of that too. I haven't come up with that typing for myself to flatter myself. It's based on really looking at the type as a whole and what I know of myself and my vices and where I'm fixated. It's based on that. It's not based on me trying to be cool or whatever. I can promise you that much. So I'm skeptical. I feel I'm skeptical of it myself on my own, without other people needing to come in and tell me I'm an idiot. It's rude, and I think it covers up their own insecurities and their own ignorance. The Enneagram is not a perfect exact science. All of these added components over time don't necessarily add up because they were done by different parties. So you're going to struggle a little bit, and people have a different way of gauging that. And given that we're all individuals, if you look at it objectively, it's, there's going to be a huge difference of opinion and difference of biases and understandings. So the moral of the story is type yourself. Don't have a knee-jerk reaction to what other people say. Don't feel like you have to fit a type perfectly. It's not going to happen. And look for the underlying dynamics of the type. Type your full trifix. Don't just type the core type. And, use a variety of sources to type yourself. Pore over resources and get a balanced idea of what the types are and how they function. And explore yourself over the course of your life. Focus in particular on your childhood, which is when it started to develop and when you became aware of it. That's what Ichazo did, and other authors kind of fell in line, but he had a good template for a theory behind, the object relations and why we fit in with those. Each type is an object relation, right? It's you in relation to an important person or figure or community or party in your life. That's what an object relation is. Classically it's with the mother, and different authors did this differently, but that's basically what the psychological, understanding of the Enneagram often does follow. The more spiritual side probably says that it's from birth and that it's fated or whatever. The point is that you have a type and you have access to seeing how it developed and what it's made of, right? What it's defined by, and an insight into who you are, where your strengths and your weaknesses are, what you can do with yourself, the range you operate within, the control you have, and all of that can be done, must be done on your own. If you have a good teacher to help walk you through it, show you resources, ask you questions, challenge you a little bit, that's great. But all they should be doing is reflecting back to you, what you're saying to them. They shouldn't be pushing anything. Many of these people push something and they try to type you and they're aggressive. And once you see what they're doing, it's pretty crazy. It's not ethical. It's not fair. It's not how the Enneagram should be practiced. They can have an idea, but it should always be tailored to what you say and, what's going on inside. It shouldn't just be them, having their ideas run away with them and projecting their biases onto you. So those are my fascinating stories to share about my experiences. Okay, thanks for watching.